Hello, everybody. This is part two of a video that I did yesterday of the first week of my experience on HCG, the HCG protocol. I left some things out, so I just decided to do a part two, and maybe I'll do a part three if I think of more things. There was a lot that went on that day, so those that week, I'm gonna try to keep this a little focused. So I'm going to do the measurements, weights, heights, the general flow of my day, planning, shopping lists, and loading. That's what I'm going to talk about in this one. So, my name is Alison Torba. I'm 42 years old, and I have struggled with weight my whole life. And I started the HCG diet. So on July 9th of 2015. I keep my notes in a little notebook like this, and every day is another day, and that's how I track what I did that day. So I track what I ate, and I also track anything else that is different, so I can refer to it later to see if there was a weight gain or if there was an issue. I can remember what I did. I also was on some medications when I went on HCG, and my naturopath suggested that I slowly go off of them. And so I also was weaning myself off of medication, and I made notes here saying, okay, I took it this day, I didn't take it that day, I took it this day, because I was slowly reducing how much I took. So that was really helpful with this book because I would forget, did I take it yesterday or not? I also track my dogs because in the morning I feed my dogs, and I've been tracking their food too. I've started to get into raw feeding with my dogs. So this has just been helpful in a lot of different ways. But so this little tracking book, it just makes it so that I don't have to write a lot, but I just get the general gist of things. And I started loading. And I thought loading was going to be fantastic adventure, and I was going to have such a fun time, and because I had 3 days of eating whatever I wanted, which sounded like a dream to me because I've been trying to control my food for a long time. And so to have a doctor, a naturopath, tell me, this is a microphone, by the way. It looks like I got this black thing. It's kind of blurry, but it's just a headset microphone. It's so yeah, I felt like I was in a sort of dream when I went to the naturopath, and she said, okay, so for 3 days you're going to eat as much fat and sugar as you possibly can. And I just have never even encountered anything like that. And I thought I had died and gone to heaven, really. It was just like, oh my gosh, I can't even believe this is happening. And I just was very excited about it, and extremely excited about it. And I went, and I had been waiting for about 3 weeks. I had heard of HCG through a colleague, and she had used it and through this naturopath, and had lost several pounds, and I think like 50 pounds, and she kept it off for 2 years, and I talked to her after the 2 years, 2.5 years, and so that's how I was referred to this clinic. And I had a lot of faith in this colleague. I knew a lot about her, and I knew that we had similar histories with food, um, and so her success, I was sold pretty quickly because of that referral. So I just found out about HCG, and it came from somebody who was older. The woman who referred me was in her 60s, and she wasn't playing around. She wasn't doing this to she wasn't yo-yo dieting. She was doing it for health reasons, and she was serious and um, motivated by weight loss, needing to lose weight, not about appearance primarily. And so, so it was just a really clean, solid referral from somebody who was very healthy, in my opinion, and so and stable. And so it cost me $450 for all the shots and to go in, and so I talked about that on the first video. So yeah, so I started with the naturopath, and she told me this. So I was driving home, and I went in, and then the next day I started because I thought I was pretty much ready to go. I just wanted to get started because I had been waiting for 3 weeks for the appointment. Um, and so I was driving home, and I planned, okay, if I can eat all of the fat and sugar that I possibly can, what would I eat? And I was just so I got sugar cookies that with frosting on them from the grocery store, and I got like 5 pints of Ben and Jerry's, everything but the ice cream. And I went to my favorite Italian restaurant, and I got a calzone and a pizza that were just covered with fat, just covered with meat and cheese and big, big, lots of crust, thick crust, lots of sauce, and cookies from there, fresh baked cookies. And I got whole cream, whipping cream, and whole milk, and I think, yeah, more cookies. And whenever I felt like I wasn't full, I would eat more. And what happened, oh, and chocolates and candy. I got Kit Kat and chocolates like that I really like, and candy, um, and what happened was like I always had stomach pain before I went to this naturopath. I would just, my stomach would hurt when I would eat. And my diet before this was, I wouldn't say it was really bad. Um, I was trying to do low fat. And so I would do things like make potato salad, and I would like strain yogurt instead of using mayonnaise. And I would make potato salad with yogurt in it, um, and I would eat fish, and I would just I would go to fast food restaurants, but I never like regularly got French fries or shakes, or oh, that's what I did when I was loading. I went to McDonald's and I got a shake, and I got hamburgers and French fries at I did a McDonald's run, and the cookies, and but that wasn't something that I did a lot. I I probably did that maybe when I'd get sick, I would go to McDonald's because I'd feel bad. I kind of had a thing for chicken McNuggets, so I'd buy the $5 and eat the 20 chicken McNuggets occasionally. But I would get, I probably regularly would get a double cheese hamburger from McDonald's, the 99-cent ones, and I would eat those. They were cheap, and when I would get, when I'd be out and about, that's what I would do. And then I often went and got the fresh baked cookies from McDonald's too. The 2 cookies for $1. I'd eat those. Um, so, but my food habits weren't like I ate 3 times a day. Um, every once in a while, I would get the box of sugar cookies from the grocery store, and I would the fresh baked ones that are in the bakery department with the frosting on them, and I would sometimes eat the whole box in one day. But I would do that maybe very like maybe once a month, that kind of thing. So I actually wasn't. I was 211 pounds, which, considering the amount of um, emotional issues I have with emotional eating, and the amount of sugar cravings that I had, and how much I like sugar, I was actually doing pretty good. That was a good. That was I was lucky to be 211. Um, and really, most of the reason why I was not 250 or above, because my father was 250 and above when he was my age, and was because I have done a lot of emotional work around food, and so I have let go of using food to medicate myself emotionally a lot. I have done a lot of work, just working, feeling my own emotions rather than eating. And I've spent years doing that kind of work. So I really do believe that that's huge, because I would reactively go to the food and I couldn't stop myself from going to the food. And so slowly over time I've been able to release some of that the emotional pent up emotions, and also when I would get anxious I would eat, and I practiced living a life that had less anxiety in it, learning how to make choices where I wasn't frightening myself or putting myself in situations that were overwhelming to me. So, or with being with people that were overwhelming, or and practicing calm, trying to be calm. So I had done quite a bit of that too, and I think that lessened how much I ate, because I simply, if I got to a certain point of anxiety, I couldn't stop myself from eating. That's just what I would much. Um, but I guess I'm fortunate in that I wasn't. I knew that if I bought like a pint of Ben and Jerry's, it would be gone, and so I wouldn't buy things. But there's a real struggle there. There's still a fight, and a resistance and a struggle with food. Um, wanting it and having to stop myself. And that's really what over the years has gotten so exhausting. And um, one of the things that the HCG has really opened up for me is this idea of not being hungry, and feeling, not even just an idea, an experience of not being hungry all day, and what that's like. And so but I'll talk about that in another video. But this one, so the loading was, um, I would say in the first half an hour, the candy and the cookies, I ate them and I got sick. And I don't know why I got sick. So what I did is I put the ingredients on this one of these things. Like, I cut the ingredients label out and I put it here, because I said I need to know what makes my stomach hurt so bad. I don't know what it is that's doing it. And it had to have been in this, and it was Ferrero chocolates, or it had to be in these cookies I ate. And they were the sugar cookies from Target, and they had like a lime flavoring, but they had sugar cookie. They weren't very good. I've had way better, and I was disappointed that I got those, because I really like these sugar cookies. Are my favorites. Um, but I thought over time I'll be able to look and see, maybe later, and see. I mean, here they've got contains wheat, egg, milk, and soy. So pretty much everything. And the first ingredient is sugar for these cookies. Um, and they have, artificial flavor. cornstarch. There wasn't anything that I hadn't eaten before, and I'd had these cookies a zillion times without being sick. So I thought maybe it's not the cookies, maybe it's this chocolate, milk chocolate, lecithin, hazelnuts, sugar, palm oil, wheat flour, cocoa powder. It's all the same stuff. So it was just kind of weird, um, for me, because it seems maybe it was the amount of what I was eating. And it could have also been the whole milk that I was drinking with the cookies, milk and cookies. Um, the whole milk I've had problems with before, where I drink it and my stomach immediately hurts. And so that would indicate maybe a milk sensitivity. 42. Don't know whether or not I'm lactose intolerant. I'm surprised that the doctors don't identify these things for you or help you when you go into a checkup. It just seems strange to me, since this is such a common thing to drink milk. And so why is it that they don't include that in doctors' visits? I mean, especially when it could have been like, me, basically having a stomach ache all day long. Why isn't that included? It's so strange how food seems to be disconnected from like a doctor's visit, or at least for me, it has been. The doctors don't talk about what I eat at all. I've never, I've had to bring it up when I've brought it up. And it seems like this whole, like, oh, isolating allergies is like a big, long process that only, super expensive naturopaths care about. And, it's going to take 3 months, and you're going to suffer because you can only eat one food. And I just don't think it has to do with, I just don't think it has to be so extreme. I don't think, and I'm sort of irritated with the lack of just simple knowledge and information about food and the effects of food on us, and help with getting some clarity and some support about what the effects of different foods have. I mean, when I think about it, my mother is like, I think she was 65 before she started to look at and started to notice, oh, what does this food feel like in my belly? And is this bad for me? And then she stopped the gluten, and it's like she was like in her 60s. I mean, and I just I don't think that that's unusual in America. But I guess better late than never. So loading, yeah. So the day 9, I started. The 10th, I had very bad stomach ache for over 2 hours from this chocolate or from the cookies. Um, Peanut butter Kit Kat, something else at the Desert Museum, whole milk. The next day I had whole milk, juice, and felt sick again. Okay, so I actually felt sick just on the chocolate and sugar cookies. Ate lots of Ben and Jerry's ice cream, and I didn't get sick at all. I love that everything but that's. And then I just ate and ate until I was uncomfortable. And my naturopath said that the people who really lose a lot of weight really load a lot. The people she's seen who really eat a lot of fat and just really overdo all of this, that they actually lose more than the people who don't. So I was encouraged highly by my naturopath to do all this. I also got a whole container of bacon, and I cooked it all up and ate it all, the whole thing. So, so that was the loading day, and I talked a little bit about a bacon thing I had on the last video, but and I did want to say that the last video I was washing dishes with baking soda and vinegar. That's how I kept away from the oil, because hopefully you know that you're not supposed to touch oil at all when you're on the HCG diet. Touch it, eat it, nothing. And so, dishwashing oil, dish soap, I've seen probably has oil in it. And so I was using vinegar and baking soda, and I had this bacon grease pan, and the baking soda and vinegar didn't cut it. So I had to go out and get better soap. And so it was just the lesson learned is that loading days, clean the dishes at night the last day so you're not touching any food in the sink, any oil in the sink on the pans or on the glasses or anything. Get everything cleaned up that night. So when you wake up in the morning, you're not dealing with pans or dishes from loading days, or even packaging or bags from loading days where maybe you had oil on things, or make sure your cupboards are cleaned off. So the first day on the HCG injections was the 12th of July, and I started with 500 calories. And yeah, so my weight loss has been so for loading. What happened is I started at 211.5, and then on the 10th, the ninth and the 10th, on the 10th I was 211.5, and then on the 11th I went up to 217, and then on the 12th I was at 215, and that was my first day of injections. And then the second day of injection I went down to 209.5. So I was down on the second day of I was 2 pounds less than I started with before I started the loading day. So it came off in one day. The whole of one day of injection, the loading weight plus 2 pounds came off. So that's pretty dramatic. It was hard to believe it was really happening, and I just thought, wow. And I didn't know a lot about pounds, but I had a nutritionist once who had like a chunk of fat. It was like a plastic chunk of fat, and it was a pound of fat. And that I thought about that many times over this period, that chunk of 1 pound of fat. And it was probably like as big as this thing, maybe a little bit bigger. Um, and it was like a glob, and that was a pound of fat. And so when I lost a pound, I lost that much off of my body. And I would visualize that. It was like, wow, that's a lot. And I talked to my naturopath, and she said that I asked her if you lose it with peeing, because she said she had me drinking in the mornings. Like I'd fast up until noon, so she asked me to not eat until noon. So I would just drink water and broth, and that would be broth from Fry's organic Simple Truth broth. That's 0% everything. So, and that was one of my free foods. It is my free food, so I can drink a lot of it. And that was a saving grace for me, because I can have warm broth at any time and it doesn't affect my calorie count or anything. So that's a huge tip that really saved me. And so I would have broth and water in the morning up until noon, and then I would eat. So I asked her, when does the fat go, or how does it get out of the body? And she said, well, you pee some of it out, but it comes out in your bowel movements mostly. And I was like, okay, well, it's strange. So she said, if you don't drink enough, or if you don't pee enough, drink and pee, that your body can reabsorb the fat. So you need to keep flushing your system out with water or broth in the mornings, and at night. So, so that was really important. And so that's what I was doing. And the exact amount of water that I drank, I'm going to do another blog on that because that was a huge complex issue for me. Um, so, yeah, okay. And I was fortunate because my naturopath she had a bunch of menus that fit the phase one requirements. And so I just went through there and I wrote down all the ingredients and I made a shopping list. And I had gone to the several stores I had to go to get everything. And so I had everything in the refrigerator. And it was good because it was like, okay, it was a huge experimental process that first week of what do I like, what can I make, what's good, um, what's fast to make, what's slow to make, what do I need to pre do in advance, how do I need to do this. So it was no a pretty long process. And what I came up with is that I have a list on my refrigerator because this is a whole change of life style thing. I noticed that there was so much that was changing. I would forget about all of the things I had to do in the morning in order to keep me going. Um, and so I made a list, a morning list that I could just review quickly and make sure that I did everything. Um, and that included to take the HCG injection, which I almost forgot once, and to weigh myself, which I never forgot. And then I made an agreement with myself to make one thing in the morning, just one item of food, whether it was salad dressing or I was measuring meat or I'm putting it in bags or I was making a spice mix or anything, but just one thing to have it be done. So, and I needed to do that because I was doing everything clean food is what they call it, where everything I threw out all of my spices that had any kind of MSG or any kind of additive. Actually, my naturopath said if it says natural flavor on it or any kind of synthetic flavoring, any kind of flavoring, just like a general term that has flavoring in it, forget it. And so, and turned out that most of my spices did have these kind of extra ingredients. And that was really interesting because it was like, why are they in there? And then I noticed the chemicals for preservatives, and I thought, that's just kind of creepy. Um, and I threw out most of my spices, and I went down to the local food co-op, which is like a to me I hadn't been there in a long time, but they had the best organic spice section in town. They have like 100 different things in jars, bulk, and turned out that they had really good spices, and the spices taste the spices were really good and they were organic, so they didn't have any additives. But some of them did, and so I had to call and talk to them about that because the lists, some of them were organic, some of them weren't. And I also was interested in possibly doing wheat free or gluten free, or at least being aware of when I'm putting carbohydrates in my diet, even if it's a small amount. And so I was exploring that because it turns out that there's all these additives that are carbs in spices even, um, or like hidden carb, the idea of hidden carbs. So I wanted to see what was just a pure spice and where could I get it. So um, and I watched this video and they said the best way to do all this, because spices are so expensive at the grocery store, they're like $5 or $6 and you get a big thing, but then who knows if you're going to use it, right? So the most economical, I think, efficient way of doing what I did was I went to this bulk and I just got a little bit of each spice that was in this ingredients list, all these different menus that I had from my naturopath, and I just got maybe like half, like a teaspoon or 2 teaspoons or 3 teaspoons of a spice, different kind, all the spices that they had in there. And so I had like 50 little bags or like 30 little bags with spices. And I still have some of them. And that turned out, I mean, it's an experiment, and it is a new thing to discover what it is that worked for me or what I liked. And I did discover a couple really surprising things. One of the things was that I could spice food without oil, and I could really like it. I also could spice food without just having salt and really like it. And I was kind of like really into this Cajun spice, this green Cajun spice that I used to put on everything. And I found that I actually like a couple other types of spicing patterns and so that was hopeful for me because I really felt like I was dependent on salt and and oil, but salt and oil and just kind of like that basic sugar, salt, and oil. I have to, ketchup, or it's not, doesn't taste good. Or mayonnaise, which is fat, and vinegar. And I, I was just scared about that because I could tell that I really didn't like food unless it had one of those things on it. So I discovered that, and then um, I also discovered the sweet leaf stevia, which I'm gonna do a whole other thing on stevia. But I pretty much bought every stevia flavored stevia that was available, and have been working with all of that this whole time too. How to include that, and that's that's been super helpful. And my naturopath swears that you never need to worry about it spiking your blood sugar, that it's just, and it does not make you gain weight. She just swears by it. um, she says it will not make you gain weight. So okay, I have to, trust somebody. And she has been doing this and has lost weight herself, so I just, said okay. Even though I felt kind of like I was doing something wrong, because some of the newer stevia is really good. Back in the 2000, early 2000, I was using stevia when I was doing the Atkins diet about 15 years ago, and the stevia quality was a lot lower, and it was kind of like it just didn't taste as good as some of these they do now. They really can taste good. So, especially if they're on kind of the non-sweet fruit, I'm just really liking that. So, yeah, so I made this big long shopping list, went out and bought, including all of these spices, which the spices are really what's gotten me through. Um, Montreal steak sauce too. A stir steak spice is really good, and I put that in my broth, a broth with the steak spice, and it's quite good. And the other video had a lot about my household items, and I think that was part of all this. It wasn't just the food. And so what would happen is I'd wake up in the morning, I'd wake up in the morning and weigh, and then I would read that list of things I had to do and do them because they just wouldn't completely come to mind. And then same thing, and then I would not be eating. So what I was doing was I was drinking, and my naturopath, also yerba mate tea, she said was a cleansing tea, and so that's the first time I'd ever had that. So I started brewing yerba mate, and I drank a lot of green tea before I started this, and so I was already doing pretty strong Chinese green tea like loose leaf. And the yerba mate was an alternative to that, and I was really happy to find it. I liked it a lot. I calculated the caffeine content because it changed the way that I did the water. But I didn't quite do that at first. It was just like, okay, now I have something else. Um, so yerba mate, water, and broth, and then I would wait till noon, and I would eat, and then I would, do something else, and a lot of the times it was like, wow, okay, I have a lot of time to do something here, and I would just force myself to think of something else to do besides eat. And it didn't seem like I ate a lot, but I don't know, maybe I did. It just seemed like there were long stretches going by where I wasn't eating, and maybe I would have in the past, even though I thought I only did 3 meals a day. But um, one of my patterns, though, was to kind of get jacked up on caffeine in the morning. Like, I would drink quite a bit of this. Yeah, well, the yerba mate, the caffeine is not, it's about, I would probably do about 64 ounces of yerba mate, which would be like 32 ounces of coffee, which is like, I guess it's like 3 cups of coffee. It's a lot. And I would do that, and then I would be shaky by noon. And there's a pattern there that's not, it's not new to be doing that. Uh, there's something about having the caffeine sort of give me that feeling, and that was what I believe that now when I look at it, my naturopath was talking about how the HCG diet um, resets the hypothalamus, and that my thyroid um, produces energy and stimulates digestion, and but particularly produces energy. And I think that my thyroid on the initial lab test, that's another thing, is that my naturopath took blood tests before I started the HCG diet, and I'm really glad I did that. I just think that's responsible to do that. And I'm going to do another set of blood tests for wheat, and that too. So I'm going to do another whole set um, before I go into phase 4. Um, Not phase 3, but phase 4. According to like phase, I'm talking about 1 and 2, right? We're talking about 2 would be the 500, and then phase 3, and then when I go into phase 4. Um, but she found some little glitch with the thyroid. She said she couldn't really say exactly what it was, but she was saying that things might change so much on the HCG that we were just going to wait to do any kind of physical anything until the diet was done to see what the effects of the HCG were. And I think I was really in like a fatigue, drink caffeine pattern, because I'd wake up in the morning, and I still do it to some degree, and I'd feel tired in the morning. And I think I probably wasn't sleeping that well. And she was also saying, if you don't sleep because of the caffeine you're drinking, you need to cut back on the caffeine, because if you don't sleep, you're not going to lose the weight. And I was really scared of that because I didn't want to cut back on the caffeine. But it turned out that the way I was drinking caffeine was okay. I was losing weight. So, but that was the pattern, as I would drink it and I'd get like almost shaky. I mean, almost, it's a little weird that I kind of liked that, or lived with that. But that's what I was doing. I would get shaky, and then I would be like, I have to eat, and then I would eat, and and then the afternoon would be less eventful. Sometimes around 4, I want to have something warm, so I want maybe more tea, or I've done like a hot chocolate thing with stevia and water. Um, and then dinner. And so that's also kind of a eating pattern for me, is to be sort of involved in life and kind of maybe high on caffeine and doing, and then suddenly bang, I'm hungry super fast. Just like what happened, what the lady who wrote Weight Loss Apocalypse says, is that it would boom, it hit me, and I'd be like starving almost immediately, and I'd be shaky and starving, and not having time, not having made food, and then like, oh god, I have to throw something together, and I'd be, maybe if I'd be on the road, I'd be really irritable, or like, oh, and that's been a like a noticeable pattern, is this last minute, oh. And so, I did institute that, making something early in the day, like in the morning, always making something so that I had things prepared. um, but there's more to it, where it was like this whole idea of planning food in advance, and the idea of like, you have to start cooking and chopping things and getting it done before you get lightheaded and angry. And you know th- that is, it's a very interesting thing. It's hooked into housewifery for me, I think. And my mother actually used to make my lunches, and she would make my breakfasts when I was living there, and then she would make dinner. So everything was made. And when I got out onto my own, I wasn't really in that pattern, and I never had kids. Um, and so I never really got into like a food preparation cycle until I got into a pretty strict diet program about 5 or 6 years ago. I used to make my own food, and I would do a food plan every morning for the next day. And so that's actually what I started doing when I started HCG, is I started doing food plans for the day, the following day. So I would make sure I had everything in the refrigerator that I was going to be cooking the following day. And I started the HCG. When I started the HCG, that was part of my writing down in here, but I wrote it on another bigger piece of paper, what I was planning on. But because I had bought everything beforehand, it was already in the refrigerator, and there's a limited amount of food you can eat anyway. So it was pretty easy. It was like, I'm going to eat, one thing or another, like one of those meats and one of those vegetables, and that's it. So, so I kind of let up on that after a couple weeks, but it kind of swung the other direction, where it was like, oh, what am I going to eat now? I was kind of back to the old. So, I'm trying to find some middle ground, where I'm aware that every few days, every maybe 2 or 3 days, I need to think about food. Maybe not every morning for the following day, but like maybe every 2 or 3 days, I need to go, okay, I need to have enough food for the next 3 days. What have I got? And kind of do a general inventory in my mind and get into that habit. And that's been practice. And I think I live alone, and I think that it's good because I can practice doing it in the way that works for me, and I'm not forced or hooked into somebody else's diet. Because in the past, I just have a long history of being influenced by partners, boyfriends who eat a certain way, and it's never been good. So I like that I'm alone, and I can just really be up against a wall and looking at my own patterns and what I need to do. So so yeah, like daily food plans were too rigid, but then I still want to do some kind of plan. So I might do that, where it's just every 3 days. Um, so so yeah, planning. And I have an Outlook calendar that I use for work, and I think I could calendar it in, just every 3 days, do an inventory, see what I need to buy. It's a little haphazard now. I realize, oh, I'm almost out of this, I'm almost out of that, and then I make a shopping list. But sometimes I lose the shopping list. I'm just not just it's strange the kind of randomness I feel around all this and blurriness, and it's just a if I had a kid, I think I would be very different. But because I don't, I just don't have the the formatting. And so it's a big deal for me to reintroduce meal planning into my life. Um, so then the day would go by, and then I'd have my I was very concerned about nights because that's when I want to eat, and so I would wait as long as I could to eat dinner so that I was my belly was full before I went to bed, so I wasn't sitting there with nothing to eat while I was watching TV, putting myself to bed. And I did that for a while. But it turned out that I had things I could eat, like the broth, for example, hot broth, if I really wanted to. And that, because the HCG took care of the hunger, I really didn't have it wasn't like any other diet I'd done before where I was like wanting food. It just wasn't like that. So it wasn't as concerning as I was concerned. It wasn't, didn't, I was, I didn't have to be concerned. Okay, so my so this is the basics. I maybe should have done this at the beginning, but my height is 5'10", and okay, so I did say that my weight started at 211.5, and today it's the 23rd of August, so I started on July 10th, so it's the 23rd of August today, and I'm gonna go from the weight I was on day 40, because the 40 days is pretty standard that people are going to be doing the HCG for 40 days. So on day 40 I was 182.8. So I dropped let's say 7, 10, 17, 27, 28, about 29 pounds up to day 40. 40 days, 29 pounds. Pretty good. That's pretty good. The average is 0.5 pounds, half a pound a day for women. And there were a lot of, like, I'm going to say, I don't know if I'd call them stall days, but there were a lot of days where it didn't seem like I was losing much weight. And I had more days than I realized where I went up in weight. And the problem with that was, well, anyway, I'll do another one on scales because that's been a whole drama too. Okay, so I've lost a lot of weight, and I took a before video and before pictures and after pictures, and I don't know how to put that up, but I have them. And honestly, with the videos, I did one of the videos 20 days in, and I couldn't, or I had lost 20 pounds, not 20 days in, I lost 20 pounds. And when I saw the video, because I thought, oh, well, I'm going to really notice because I'll see it on the video, I couldn't tell. I couldn't tell. But when I started to lose more than that, like lately, I can see it more. But I couldn't tell from the video and the pictures either. So I don't know why that was. It was almost like maybe my brain couldn't process it. I see it in the mirror, but maybe I didn't see the videos side by side, and so I'd want to do that. Like I'd open one and then I'd open the other one really fast and see if I could see a difference, and I really didn't. But in the mirror, I can definitely see I lost. And then my measurements are. So I made an Excel spreadsheet of my measurements, and this is all new to me. I've never done my measurements ever in my life. And so I just am sharing this because it was new for me and it's probably new for others, and I find it helpful because what they're telling me is that the measurements on my body can change and my weight can stay the same because the fat will reduce, and fat is a lot has more bulk than muscle does. And so when I lose fat, I might lose fat and gain muscle. I'll be the same weight, but the bulk of my body will be smaller, so my size will go down. And that's like a size, if I'm a size 14 and then I'm a size 12, that's what I mean by size. So the inches on my body go down, even though I might not lose a lot of weight. And so they said really keep track of that, your inches, so that you can see changes also, not just weight. So I did that and I did finally measure on the 12th of July, which is a few days after everything, because I didn't even know how to do it. And I started to measure. So I think that this is important because I've learned later, I'm going to show you. I learned later how to measure. When I first did it, I didn't really, let's see, I don't know if I can, well, I'm just going to show you here. So this, I'm kind of tight here. I hope you can kind of see. Okay, so if you look at my body, you'll see that, I don't know if you can see it really. At my waist, I'm high-waisted. So you can kind of see how my waist goes in. That's my waist, even though my belly button is here. My belly button is here, my waist is here. So it's higher. It's quite a bit higher. So so this is my waist. So it feels a lot higher than what I would think would be a waist. So I measure, and then I had this stupid measuring tape that I don't even really have a proper measuring tape, but it is. So I measure there on my waist. So that's my waist. And then they say like lower abdomen measurements, and so that's like the belly, is what I understand that. And now I see it as you want to do it in the place where it's the biggest. It doesn't really matter, just the place where it sticks out the biggest. So that would be my lower abdomen, which I was thinking about my hips, but that's just call it the lower abdomen, right? And then because my hip bone is right there, so I don't know, technically maybe it is, and then this was the biggest part, which was my butt. So then I measured like the biggest part of my butt, which drops below the belly. So you lose that bulk from the belly, but then you go back, into the butt. And so this ended up being my biggest measurement. And I wanted to find the place that I was the biggest. So I dropped it down to my thighs to see if is it, and also putting my legs together. That was a big thing too. Like if my legs are wider, I'm going to be wider. So I want to put my legs together, and then I would find the place. So it's like I'd measure there and then I'd go up a little bit. And okay, is it getting smaller? Oh, okay, is it getting smaller? Where is it biggest? To find the biggest place. So that's what I did, is I found the biggest place. And then that's what I put. And then with the thighs, it was to measure, you can't really see it, but to find the part of my thigh which ended up being my inner thigh, like my upper inner thigh, like right at the very top of my leg. That's where I'd measure, like right at the top of my leg, because that's where it was biggest for me. And then the same thing with my arms, measuring around here in the biggest place. And then I measured around my neck. And I made a mistake because I actually didn't measure my belly the first time I did measurements, which was one of the most important places, and I just didn't think about it. I didn't know how to do any of this. So So the neck actually ended up not really changing. I kind of wish that you could measure like your double chin, and I don't know how that's done. But I know that I lost fat on my face, but I don't know how to measure that. My neck never changed. It was always 15 inches. So this is from July 12th to August 16th. So about a month. Over a month. My bust, oh, and then the bust was just around my boobs, and that dropped 1 inch. I went from 40 inches to 39 inches. My waist, which I showed you earlier, which was my belly, no, which was my waist, went from 36 inches to 33 inches. So I lost 3 inches. My hips went from 47 inches to 44 inches. So that's that low, the lower, where I was measuring around my butt, and that's what I'm calling my hips. So it's below my belly. That's 47. It was 47. It went down to 44, and so I lost 3 inches. My upper arm, I lost 1 inch off of both arms, and my right thigh, I lost. I was at 31 inches, and it went down to 27 inches, which is really amazing how much my legs. And then 31 inches to 27 inches on the other thigh too. So both thighs, I lost 4 inches off of each thigh. That's just amazing to me. The belly, I still have a lot on my thighs too. And the belly, I went from 45 inches to 40 inches off of my belly. Now, that was a guesstimate, the 45, because I hadn't measured that, but on the 22nd, 10 days later, I was definitely 43 inches on my belly, and I knew that I had lost at least something. And my rate was about 2 inches because I was at 41 another week later. So it was about 2 inches a week. And so I went to 45, 43, 41, and then on the last day I was 40. So that's the 16th. So I lost 5 inches off of my belly, and that was my front belly. Yeah. And then there's this idea of measuring like the shoulders, like around the shoulders at the armpit length, like right where you'd be, like you'd measure around here like a shawl, and then right at the armpit length height, and that's supposed to have some kind of a muscle mass thing. So I just started doing that. I don't quite know what that's all about. There's percentages that they say you can kind of figure out what measurements are the best for you, so you're not necessarily judging your weight loss or judging your body on just the weight that you are, but also on your measurements. There's ways to calculate proportions to see if you're overweight just with using measurement and not with scales. So I'm just looking into that, but that's another topic. So so yeah. So that's plenty. It's another hour-long video, so I'm doing the best I can here. I've got a lot to say. I hope that's helpful, and I hope that you have a wonderful time doing this.